Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Living Authentically, Becoming Your True Self, the podcast where we explore what it really means to live, speak and lead from a place of truth and kindness. I'm your host, Sue Whitaker, a life transitions and identity coach, where I guide individuals through significant life changes, helping them to rediscover their true selves and embrace new beginnings with confidence and clarity. Today's episode is all about digital identity. And what I mean by that is I want to talk a little bit more about everything from online presence and behaviour to social media profiles, data or digital footprint, and virtual communities and interactions. So let's dive straight in. So when I talk a little bit about online presence and behaviour, it's very much compiled up of a lot of different things. And all of the things that we do paint a picture of what people think we are or who we are. Now, obviously, I'm going to share a little bit about my experience of being digital. So I'm actually of the generation that I had my first landline telephone at home when I was about 11 years old. Before that, it wasn't really an option. And when we actually did want to meet up with other people, we had to arrange it well in advance. We had to set a time, a date, and a meeting point. And we had to make it clear because if you weren't there, we didn't know what was going to happen. It also meant that if you were late for some reason and we knew the route you were taking, you ended up actually having to go down that route and hope that you would see them along the way. So the telephone that I actually had in the household was a static phone, and it was common at that time that it would be on the wall near the stairs, and what would happen is that people would actually call at agreed times and you were only really able to move depending on how far the cord stretched. So I spent many of my time in my early teenage years being able to actually have a phone, call with people, but actually it was sitting on the stairs. And in the winter, it was cold. I think I actually owned my first mobile phone when I was at university. And the internet was something that you went to check your email on, which I did probably every few days or so. It was still actually quicker than sending letters in the post, but for us, that was fast. So what happened was I set up an email and I used Hotmail. At the first time at university, and I had to come up with some kind of useful name that incorporated my real name to make sure that I could actually get a handle. One of the things that we did when we were at university was we were always in the library, and that's where the computers were, and that's where the internet was, because when I was at university, we didn't have such things as phones that had internet. Now, some of the younger viewers who are actually reading or listening to this will actually say, I have no idea how you would survive with that. And to be honest, I'm not sure looking back on it now, I actually know how we survived, but we did. And I think what we did was when we were actually with our friends, etc., we ended up talking and sharing our experiences of the world around us. That could be anything from literally what people were doing over the road from us to actually what was on TV. It was very uncommon to have internet actually in your halls of residence. You had power, you had light, you had electricity, but it wasn't necessarily internet. My mobile phone was when I actually finished university. So I was 21 years old, and I ended up actually having a phone that had a little aerial that you pulled out and a little speaker area that you actually pulled down like a flip. It was a brick. It was heavy, it was unruly, and honestly, I didn't really want to carry it around that much. But the convenience of having it and being able to make a call whenever I wanted seemed actually pretty cool. Not everybody had mobile phones. And even if people did have mobile phones, they didn't always work. If you were actually somewhere, even in a town or in a shop, there's a good chance that actually you weren't going to get a signal very reliably. I think I must actually be feeling like I'm talking in the dark ages at this point. And one of the things that my mobile phone did was it only took and received calls. I think that it actually took a couple of phones before things like Snake, the mobile phone game, or text messages were actually came along. But initially it was just you had a phone book in there, you could put your numbers in there, you could dial it, and they could dial you. That was it. End of. I guess one of the other things that we always talked about as well was that when you're actually in the local community, if you wanted to know what was going on, you'd have to read it in a local newspaper or read the notice boards or speak to the neighbours that lived there. A lot of information was passed through the connection of individuals, and that was no exception for our community. If you wanted to have an event or arrange an event, you'd have to drop flyers to people. You'd have to put things through the door, or you'd have to knock on the door and tell them that things were happening. So if you did actually have to make a change, it was a huge inconvenience because you'd then have to go around and tell everybody that, sorry, that didn't happen this Friday, it was going to be the Friday after. I think that all of these elements means that actually that life felt pretty slow. It was very rare that you would actually make plans unless you were absolutely sure. Because the problem is that once you actually changed your plans, it was an inconvenience to tell other people. I think when I look back on it between now and then, today it moves a lot more quickly. Information wasn't as easy to obtain, and today that is significantly changed now the internet has come along. If you actually wanted to know what something said in a different language, then you would have to go into a book and find it, or you'd have to find somebody who spoke the language, and that wasn't always easy to come across. There wasn't such a thing like Google Translate. There wasn't really also things like apps either. The only thing that you had was programs on computers, and that's where we end up with the good old common things like Word, Excel, etc. But they were all very clunky, shall we say. And if you were working on a computer, you would work on it for a couple of hours, and then you would log off and you would leave, and you would come back and pick it up later. It didn't really live in your home, and it certainly didn't live in your bedroom or in close proximity to you a lot of the time. So yeah, that's kind of my experience of digital, or at least what I considered to be digital when I was growing up. Obviously, things have changed massively since then, and I don't think a day goes by where I don't actually look at some kind of screen. I do actually often giggle to myself that one of the things that I do is I end up exchanging one screen for another. Oh, I'm going to stop work now, but I'm going to look at my phone or watch the TV. So I'm going to actually move from one screen that may have different information on to another screen with different information on. I think that if I was actually a lot younger right now, I think my parents would have actually had a lot to say about how much I was actually spending time in front of screens. When I was a kid, and I mean probably under 10 years old, I used to sit on a piece of carpet in front of a TV, and they always used to say to me, don't keep looking at the screen, your eyes will go square. I think that probably is a little bit lost on me now, that given that I've actually been wearing glasses for most of my life, but there you go. So yeah, the internet came along, domains, websites, and suddenly everything was with us at a touch of a button or a click of the mouse. I guess one of the things that I wanted to talk about is, unlike myself when I grew up, digital identity wasn't really something that I needed to worry about until I was much older. But in today's society, there is probably a lot of pressure to actually put digital identity on the radar for people, and people who are much younger than I was. One of the interesting things about having a digital identity is that the data and the footprint that's held online Even if you've never been on the internet yourself or just not had the opportunity to, chances are there's information about you on the internet. There's certainly information about people, even when they're born, straight away on the internet. That's because it doesn't matter whether you're actually contributing or not, there's data that's stored somewhere, probably on the cloud, in multiple ways, by multiple companies. Right from the point that you're born and your birth is logged, you exist not only in the world, but digitally. A lot of information is factual, so you could argue that it's accurate to represent your personality or your identity. But the reality is that you don't actually quite appreciate how much data is on the internet until you start thinking about it in that way. A lot of the data that we have is not only influenced by what we have, but also about what other people have with us. So again, you might actually not appreciate how many people have taken photographs of you or how many people have shared those photographs. Again, if you go back to somebody who's actually born today, whether it be even literally today or yesterday or tomorrow, chances are they will have a lot of digital information on them, even after only a few hours or days that they've been born. There are actually normally two types, I find, of data about us on the internet. The first is factual. And again, that is whether it's true or false. There isn't really much of a grey area. It will be things like your name, your date of birth, your email address if you have one, what you do for a living, where you live, your car registration. All those sorts of things are captured in different areas. And then obviously you've got the other side of it, which is the subjective side. So as you exist in real life, there are people all the time contributing to your digital presence. And that could be through videos, location tags, reviews of places that you've been together. But what that means is that you end up becoming more engaged on the internet as you complete forms, mailing lists, quizzes, or even sharing memes or articles with others. And what happens is that actually people then start to build a subjective view of who you are. Let's put an example on that. So I actually really enjoy animal videos, and I would imagine that a lot of people do. I enjoy little cute videos of, ducks, kittens, puppies, etc., doing funny and weird things. Now, if I share that video on my Facebook, shall we say, and I actually share it with all my friends, then obviously other people may get the impression that I actually like animal videos as well, because, let's face it, that's true. But sometimes you can actually share something that others may actually not think is cute or funny. They might actually see it as being a little bit cruel, and therefore they might actually start to make judgments about why you shared it. I don't suppose this really happens too much on the animal video side, but one of the things that we've seen a lot of recently in the coming years has been memes and articles. And again, there's the whole piece around fact checking. Do you share things before you check if it's true or not? Or do actually you share it with a view that it doesn't really matter whether it's true or not, you liked it and you want to let other people know that it exists? The interesting thing about sharing information is that if you don't actually know whether it's true or not, then maybe one of the things that you're doing is you're not doing very different to what I used to do when I was younger, when the neighbours used to tell stories about other people that they saw, and they would actually make up a different narrative. I guess one of the things that we need to talk about as well is social media itself. So again, whether you use it or not, it knows you, whether you actually know about it. And that's because it normally has information uploaded about you. Others are really happy to upload anything and everything that they have. And sometimes people do it automatically from their phones, whether it be taking photos with you in the background, or even just wishing you a happy birthday when social media tells them to. It doesn't really matter how big or small the interaction is. It just keeps getting wider about the information that the world has on you, about who you are and what you do. Now, obviously, when we talk about social media, there's all sorts of different platforms, and they all have their own privacy settings, etc., and things like that. Now, I'm not really saying that sort of thing to actually worry anybody, but in all honesty, my personal belief is it doesn't really matter how many filters, how many settings you have. If you put something on a social media platform, be aware that it is likely that some people will see it, even if you don't want it to, even if you close it down as much as you possibly can. I still think that those methods are out there that people can extract that information whether you like it or not. I guess that's one of the reasons why when I actually have my social media profiles, I don't actually post a lot of content unless it's related to my business. And I think one of the things about that is because I'm conscious of whenever I actually post things, how it will be perceived by other people. I know, it's crazy. I actually feel like I actually worry more about what strangers might think of me than actually my friends. But there we go. I guess there's always an element of judgment when it comes to actually posting things on social media, particularly if you don't bother to explain the context. One of the other things that we talk about a lot is virtual communities and interactions. Virtual communities and interactions are great because what it means is that it allows you to connect with other people that you may have common interests with. It will be common interests that you have with other people that could lead you to see people over other side of the world. When I say see, I mean digitally see or digitally get to know them. And that would just not have been possible without the internet. So it's great at connecting people to a certain degree. However, how you interact with those communities and when you speak to people can equally, like a normal flesh and blood relationship, can actually be healthy or unhealthy. So it's always important that whenever you're actually dealing with those kind of communities and interactions, that you still actually have your own boundaries. Now, we've already spoken a little bit on this podcast about relationships and boundaries, but one of the things that's really important is being digital means that there really isn't that much of a boundary when it comes to availability. Some people automatically assume that you're already there. Some people assume that you're going to be available no matter what the time is or the day is, that you'll have your phone with you and your phone will actually tell you when they're messaging you. Now, I actually have some people that I talk to and sometimes I leave messages and I wait for them to respond. Crazy, huh? Especially when it's actually on things like instant messaging platforms. But the way I kind of see it is I have the opportunity to send that message. And therefore, I don't necessarily expect them to respond straight away because I don't know what they're up to. They might be doing other things. Just because I'm available doesn't necessarily mean they're available. And then there are other people who will actually apologise when they don't respond back immediately. And then they actually try to justify why they didn't respond back immediately. Now, previously, years ago, I would have actually been quite upset if people didn't respond immediately. But actually these days, I'm a little bit more relaxed about it. And one of the reasons I'm relaxed about it is because, well, when a message comes in for me, I will genuinely have a moment where I decide whether I am actually available to make a reply or whether I want to leave it till later. What's interesting is that it doesn't really matter whether I'm actually going to reply or not. The feelings about what kind of message has been sent will probably be felt before I respond. And again, one of the things that we have with this digital identity and the knowledge of being digital is that nobody actually really understands how you were receiving that information. Were you happy when you received that information? Were you actually finding yourself in a challenging time? And what that kind of information will do. Will it make you happy or will it make you worse and more frustrated with your day? I guess the key thing will be is that we don't really know how our information that we share with others is going to be received. What we do is we see something that we like or something that we're happy with, and we'll actually make a really good effort to share it with other people. Interestingly enough, when you actually share it, sometimes I've in the past have worried about whether it's going to be met by people I know in a negative light. So, for example, if I know that somebody has just had a beloved pet die, whether that be a dog, whether that be a cat, if I then suddenly start posting about how cute my cat is, I will actually worry a little bit that the other person that's lost their cat will feel sad, because it will remind them of what they lost. Now, obviously, I don't get to control what they see. And when the internet first started, we did used to be able to control what people saw. Although now, I very much doubt that we do. I think algorithms and whatever it is that peddles behind the scene actually makes it quite difficult for us to see what it is that our friends are doing. I know there are certain social medias, and again, I'll probably mention Facebook, where I actually see a lot of things that I would say is not quite relevant to what I was looking for. However, one of the things I'll do is I will actually look for people like my friends. And sometimes, if I think, I haven't heard from that particular friend in a while, what I might do is I might actually look up their profile so I can actually see what they're saying. Isn't that really interesting? So we've gone from literally being available and being transparent and visible, and then all of a sudden we now actually get stuck behind adverts, sponsors, and other types of things. So we might not actually be as visible as we think. Now, interestingly enough, when we actually talk about social media and virtual communities, one of the other things as well is about the different names and profiles that you'll be linked to. So again, I don't think it really matters whether you use your full name, part of a name, or whether you don't use your name at all. The fact that you're actually connecting yourself to the World Wide Web, as we used to call it, or the internet as it's now known, means that I do believe that they'll find a way of relating it back to you. So I don't really see the point in using that many different names. Now, some people might actually listen to this and say, you do not know what you're talking about. And to be fair, they're probably right, because right now, I don't actually know exactly how things work. Although what I can say is that when people actually are online and they share other information that's online, I don't necessarily think that anybody can say that they can absolutely guarantee, no matter how many filters or how many closed doors or settings there'll be, that they won't be able to be found and tracked down by somebody somewhere at some point. Again, I'm not really saying this to actually make you feel unhappy or to feel concerned about it. I'm just saying that don't put anything on the internet unless you're actually prepared to have the thrown back in your face at some point. Obviously, a lot of people use the internet for connection, and I think overall it's been a great tool for us to be able to do that. But I think it comes with certain consequences. And again, all of the things that I've talked about, social media, virtual communities, digital footprint, data, is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm absolutely sure there is a lot more information that's on the internet, some that I've mentioned, some that I haven't even touched upon, that is still there talking and referring to us as individuals, whether we like it or not. All I know is that I'm actually very grateful that when I was younger, I didn't actually have a phone, or anybody else near me had a phone, so they didn't have to capture my, let's just say, quirkier sides of me when I was younger. I also appreciate that it wasn't easy to actually take photos, and it certainly wasn't easy to take videos of anything I did. So actually, a lot of the stories that I tell these days and the narratives that I give to others literally exists in my memory, and to a certain degree, I'm okay with that. Although what I will say is that it's a little saddening that people won't necessarily see my cute little face which I've shared before on Facebook when I found some kiddie photos, etc. And apparently it's pretty damn obvious to see which one I am. But that's okay. There's only a few photos of that exists. And I think I'm pretty comfortable with most of them, although the dress sense and that is a little bit to be desired. What I would say is that certainly anybody growing up in today's society will actually not have that luxury of, oh, I don't think there was a lot of photos around of me, because I think if they're proud parents and there's a proud family around you, there probably will be a lot of photos and videos and sound clips and more and more and more. Whether you're actually going to look at them and look back at them and how you think about them, I don't know. But it's not actually something that I can judge, because quite honestly, I don't have that choice. But if you are actually a younger listener and you do have that choice, let me know what you think as you've grown up and then been able to look back on some of the information that's online. Maybe you've actually seen that it's been quite a lovely trip down memory lane, as we used to call it. Or maybe you're actually seeing it a little bit as a concerning point, because let's face it, it will be something that at the time you didn't know what was going on. Or you may not have realised that you were being recorded or filmed or photographed or whatever. Or you may have just thought that it was a good idea at the time, whatever you were doing. Anyway, it doesn't really matter what we actually think or feel about the digital world. The reality is the information is there for most people to see. And what we put on it and how we actually treat it basically is what people see as our digital identity. So again, how you interact with others, whether you follow group rules, etc., whether you end up in trouble online because you've done something that you shouldn't have done against the rules of the communities that you're in, I guess those certain things will actually be seen and be known. But again, it only really depends on, are people really looking for it? If they're not looking for it, I'm not convinced that they will actually see it. But again, I think that I only can speak from personal experience. I don't have technological ability. And I think what I might do is I might actually look at some point, getting somebody on to talk about digital identity. But I guess the key thing is that it is another aspect of our identity. So what information is on there and what kind of patterns and pictures and mosaics that it makes for us is actually something that we need to consider. So when we are looking at making new connections, either online or not, then the key thing will be is if they can research it and they can find us online, then it will tell them something about ourselves. One of the interesting things I found since having my own business is I've had to be more comfortable with my information being more out there online. Multiple platforms, multiple projects, and multiple profiles. I think one of the things that we can talk about a lot of is how those profiles are seen and how people think about it for us. But the key thing for me is I try to remain consistent, and I try to make sure that whatever we're doing, I'm doing it with authenticity. Because ultimately, a spade's a spade. I don't want to shape or change where I've come from, because I consider that everything that I've done up to this point has actually made me, me. Now, some people will probably want to hide that, and that's fine. Everybody has their own reasons. I'm not going to judge. But what I would say is that if you have gone on a drunken party and there are pictures of you all over the internet on a public profile, don't expect that somebody won't see them or even call you upon it at some point. So yeah, that's really all I wanted to cover, I think, at this point on digital identity. But I did want to raise it, and I did want to actually put an episode together about this, because even though my technical knowledge may not be as good, and again, if there are some IT people on here that are actually screaming and shouting, this isn't the way it works. Sorry. The actual point of this was more about understanding a little bit more about our identity and what it means. Now, the interesting part I was going to mention was the cover photo I've chosen for this was actually me on holiday. And I look great. I look relaxed. I'm happy. I'm in good weather. And I guess that's just one of the main examples that what we do is we actually see people on the social media in our best light. I mean, some people do actually post about when they actually feel bad and when they're upset, and some people post authentically. But a lot of the time, particularly on social media, people actually show when things are going right more often than when things are going worse. When we're talking about being authentic online, I think one of the things that happens a lot is we don't actually want to share with others exactly how things are going. And I think a large part of that is a little bit around comparisons and comparing each other. So one of the things that actually, when I had low mental health, was that I didn't like comparing myself to others. I felt like everybody else had it all figured out and that I actually really didn't. And then other people will actually say exactly how it is and exactly how they feel. And the interesting thing is that when you actually say how you feel, quite often, if it's not going so well, you actually get quite a lot of compassion and kindness. But then also you can get negativity as well. And one of the things that people can struggle with is they don't need to hear the negativity, especially if they're having a low tide themselves. Obviously, a lot of what I'm talking about is social media. And I think I could probably actually talk about a whole podcast just talking about how it can shape and how it can change our mood. But I just wanted really to highlight that authentic living, particularly from a digital perspective, I think is actually quite difficult for a lot of people. I know it's difficult for me. But basically, the online overall of presence and behaviour are shaped by all of these things and all of these conversations, even from the ground of this podcast that I've actually recorded. So yes, that's pretty much it really. And I think I'm going to leave it there. So let me know what you think, if this has actually sparked anything with you. And if it has, then let me know. You can either connect with me via email or on the various social media platforms. The details are in the episode description. But until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and keep living authentically. Thank you.